Cold calling is one of the most challenging aspects of sales. Most of the time, you're calling people who have no idea who you are, and because they don't expect your call, a lot of times they're very angry, they hang up on you, and they're quite rude, right? Now, although cold calling is challenging, there are some strategies and techniques that you can use to make it a lot more easier for yourself so that you can start finding more success. So what I'm gonna do in this video is I'm gonna share with you 3 powerful cold calling techniques that I've learned throughout the years that allowed me to be more confident when it comes to cold calling and also increase my odds of turning a total stranger into a paying customer. What is going on, everybody? It's Patrick Dang here. Now, before we get started, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. And let's go ahead and dive right into these 3 powerful cold calling techniques. Now, the first technique and strategy that I have for you is control the conversation. Now, if I were to ask you a question, right? Who controls a sales conversation, especially during a cold call? Is it the prospect, the person that you are calling, or is the person that controls everything the salesperson? Now, some people might think it's the prospect because, they think that if you're cold calling someone, you're in a lower position and you're asking a favor towards a prospect. And that's why they feel the prospect should have control over the conversation. After all, you are interrupting their day. Now, I actually have news for you, and that's actually not very true. In fact, the salesperson should always be controlling the conversation while making the prospect feel like they are in control of the conversation, and that is called perceived control, right? So it's basically, when you are cold calling, understand that you should be dictating the entire conversation while making the other person feel comfortable. So a bad cold call, for example, might be like you cold call someone, they say, "Hey, are you a salesperson?" And you're like, yeah. And they say, "Okay, I don't have time. Pitch me. What do you have? Don't waste my time." And you go, "Oh, well, this is what we do." They say, "I don't need it. Bye." That would be like a bad example of a cold call where the prospect controls the entire thing, they tell you what to do, and then at the end they just say, "Nope, that's not what I need, bye." So that's what you want to avoid. You want to make sure you control the conversation. So from a mindset perspective, instead of having the prospect control it, you want to ask questions throughout the conversation to make sure that they are following your guidelines. For example, in the beginning of a conversation, you might call the person and you say, "Hey Jim, this is Patrick from HubSpot. Did I catch you at a bad time?" Jim says, "No, not really, what's up?" Right? So right there in the beginning, if I say a line like, "Did I catch you at a bad time?" Then the person says, "No, you didn't, what's up?" So you're controlling the conversation while making the other person feel like they're in control. Why is that? Well, the first line is, "Did I catch you at a bad time?" Now you basically make the prospect give you a yes or no answer. If they say, "No, you did not catch me at a bad time," then you can move to the next part of your selling process. You see, you're controlling the conversation while asking permission. You're saying, "Did I catch you at a bad time?" The person says, "No, you didn't. Tell me what you want," right? So by them inviting you to start going through the sales call, you basically got them to invite you in the door. Now you have an opportunity to sell. But as you can see, because the person asked you to sell them, they feel like they are in control of the conversation because they asked you to do it. But in fact, you asked the question first that encouraged the other person to invite you to sell. So throughout the conversation, you're doing things like this, like, "Hey, the reason I'm calling is because I help companies do X, Y, and Z, and I want to take 5 minutes to see if it makes sense for us to work together and really just learn more about your business. And by the end of the conversation, if it makes sense for us to work together, great, but if not, totally fine. Is that okay with you?" Right? That's called setting the agenda. So by setting the agenda for that example, the person says, "Yeah, that sounds fine. I got 5 minutes." In their heads, they're thinking, "Okay, this guy sounds kind of interesting. Maybe he can actually help me in some way. So let me go ahead and give him 5 minutes." But in fact, because I'm the seller, I'm setting those expectations and I'm asking the question, "Does that sound okay to you?" They're gonna say yes. But as you can see, even though the prospect feels like they gave you permission to start selling, because you framed the question in that way, the only logical answer for them is to say yes. So in fact, the salesperson is controlling the conversation while asking these questions that make the prospect give yes or no answers. And because the prospect can say yes or no at any time, they feel like they are in control of the conversation when they are really not. Now, the next tip I have for you for controlling cold calls is you're gonna want to get mini confirmations throughout the conversation. So this is an extension of controlling the conversation where you're gonna always ask these mini confirmation questions throughout your entire cold call from the beginning to end, right? So in the beginning, it's, hey John, I'm a little lost. Do you mind if I take a second to tell you why I'm calling? Sure, Patrick, go ahead and tell me, right? There's a mini confirmation, you get that yes. And then it's, oh, I want to take 5 minutes to learn about your business to see if it might make sense for us to work together. At the end of the conversation, if it makes sense, great. If not, totally fine. Is that okay with you? Yes, Patrick, that is okay with me. Okay, great. Then you move on to the next step, right? And then you start asking questions about their pain. And then when you want to pitch your product and service, you could say something like, hey, based on everything we talked about so far, it seems like you have some of these challenges that I actually might be able to help you out with. Now, would you like me to share how I might be able to help you? They say, yeah, Patrick, tell me exactly how you can help. So, throughout the conversation, before I start selling and doing what I do when it comes to sales, I'm always asking for permission. I'm saying, do you mind if I make a recommendation? Do you mind if I tell you what I do? Do you mind if I show you how I might be able to help you? Do you mind if I share what the next steps will be? I'm always asking permission before I do the thing, right? Before I start pitching, before I schedule another meeting, before I do this and that. The reason is because you want to make the prospect feel like they are in control. And how you do that, the simplest way is just to ask permission to do the thing you want to do. So if you want to pitch your product and service, ask permission to pitch. Let the prospect say, yes, please pitch me. So now they are asking you to pitch them, right? They're asking you to help them. And now you totally flip the dynamic of the power, right? Because in the beginning, if you are a beginner salesperson, you want to pitch and you're saying like, please listen to me, please buy from me. Nobody picks up the phone and you're in a losing position. They're going to be like, oh, okay, pitch me. Oh, I don't need it. Bye. But if you say, hey, do you mind if I go ahead and share how I might be able to help you? Now they're asking for you for the favor and you're helping them. So now your status in this conversation is either equal to the person or maybe it's higher. Because in a way, you're like a consultant helping them out, helping them solve their pains, right? And now you are in the position of power. Now, the next tip that I have for you when it comes to controlling cold calls is you're gonna want to listen 80% of the time, and you're gonna wanna talk 20% of the time. Now, here's the thing that people might find counterintuitive. In sales, they think that salespeople are all about being good talkers, being smooth, and talking until somebody buys something. But in fact, when you are cold calling, you're actually listening most of the time, right? Because you're gonna want your prospect to tell you all about their business, tell you about all their problems so that you can position your product and service as the solution to that problem, right? So that's why you gotta be listening 80% of the time. So, throughout your conversation, you're doing the intro, you're setting the agenda, and then you're asking a bunch of questions. When you ask these questions, you got to shut up and listen, okay? So for example, if I was in a sales meeting and I was selling some kind of software, I might be like, typically companies, your business, they're doing this thing in this certain way. Curious to know how you are handling that. And they're gonna tell you how they're handling their current situation. Whatever they tell you, you wanna listen intently and you wanna find these little cracks in what they say where you can dive deeper, right? So this is how the sales process works. You listen to what someone says and you just look for these little tiny pain points that someone talks about that may not really be a pain to them in that moment, but then you start turning it into a real pain, right? So it's like latent pain into a realized pain. A latent pain means someone has a problem that they don't know they have, but it actually is a serious problem. A realized pain is obviously they realize they have a problem. So when someone starts talking about their business, you're just looking for these little cracks where they have a latent pain and you start turning it into a realized pain. So a random example might be, let's say someone's an e-commerce store and they have different leads coming from different places, from like Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, SEO on their website, from blogs, right? So they have all this traffic and maybe they have no way to know which traffic source is generating the most sales because they're not really tracking it, right? So that is a problem. They're making money, but they don't know where the sales are coming from. So if somebody told me that and I was cold calling them, they're like, oh yeah, we're using our blog, we got YouTube, everything's working pretty well. I would say like, oh, interesting. Well, just curious to know, how do you know which channel works the best? They say, oh, well, we're not really tracking it, but we kind of have an idea. And I'd be like, oh, interesting, you have an idea, but if you're not really sure where the sales are coming from, how do you know where to invest more resources in the future so that you can double down and actually generate more revenue for the channel that works the best? And they're gonna be like, well, I guess I never really thought about that because we just spend our money equally everywhere. But you're actually right, because if we knew where the sales were coming from, why don't we just put more money there, right? So now, for this random example, I'm turning a latent pain into a realized pain. Someone is doing something they, have been doing for a long time. It works, there's nothing wrong with it, but it could be so much better, right? So the pain is they're wasting a lot of opportunity, and they could be making way more money than they are now if they had a tracking software in place to track where all their sales were coming from all the different lead sources, for example, right? And obviously there's a lot of software out there that does this kind of stuff. So what I'm doing is I'm looking for these cracks where someone has a problem, and I'm diving deep. So when it comes to controlling the conversation, what typically happen is when you start finding these problems, and you know what these problems are, because if you have a product and service that solve these specific problems, you can create these questions ahead of time to trigger the customer to talk about these problems. Now, so when you find these pains, you basically ask more and more questions to keep getting the prospect to talk about their problems. And the prospect, they feel like they're in control of the conversation because they're the ones talking, right? They're telling you all their problems. But in fact, the salesperson is in complete control because they're gonna ask these trigger questions to get the prospect talking. When you get the prospect talking more about their pains, they're getting into this emotional state where they're like, oh my God, I have all these problems. I need to solve it right now. And this is exactly what the salesperson wants, right? Because if there's no pain, there's no sale. If there's no pain, right? There's no reason for why someone should spend money on your thing to solve their problem. So that's why you gotta ask these questions, control the conversation to basically get the prospect to emotionally get invested in the problems that they have so that they can later get emotionally invested into your product and service, because you're basically their savior that's going to make the pain go away. So in any type of cold call, if you are talking too much, you're probably not getting the prospect emotionally charged and emotionally invested in your product and service, because they don't want to listen to you speak. They want to talk, right? Like, it's kind of like this. I always feel like everybody has a story to tell. Everybody has problems they want to vent out. But there's not many people willing to listen to their problems. So as a salesperson, it's your job to be that person they can bounce ideas with. You're that person that they can go to talk about their problems. And you're also that person who happens to have the solution to the problem as well. It's like someone who needs to go to a doctor. They're sick, they need to tell someone their problem. The doctor gives them medicine. In return, they have to pay a fee and buy the medicine. You're doing the exact same thing as a professional seller. And so that's how you control the conversation. It's by getting the prospect to talk 80% of the time, to talk about their problems, and using these trigger questions to encourage the prospect to share how they really feel. And how the prospect is going to feel subconsciously is they're going to think, wow, Patrick really understands me. He understands my problems. Nobody else will even listen to me. Not even my boss will listen to me. And I really think Patrick can help me out here. So I'm gonna look to see his software a little bit more to see if I should actually buy this thing, right? That's exactly how you want the prospect to feel. So overall, what's happening when you use all the different techniques I showed in this video is that, you change the status of yourself as a salesperson. You're no longer just someone trying to pitch your product and service to anyone that's willing to listen. You're now coming in almost like a strategic partner, listening to someone's problem and being that savior that's going to help them out of their pain and eventually get them to buy a product and service. And of course, at the end of the day, because you're helping them out either with saving them time, making them more money, making their pains go away, well, everybody wins because they remove the problem from their life just from buying your product. And obviously you as a salesperson generate a sale, right? Win-win situation on both sides. So those are gonna be my 3 strategies when it comes to improving your cold calls. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to give it a like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. And if you wanna take your sales game to the next level, I actually got a course, Sales Legacy, the masterclass that's gonna show you everything you need to know when it comes to starting and accelerating your sales career. So if you wanna check that out, link is in the description. With that said, my name's Patrick Dang, and I'll see you guys in the next one.